How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. I don't know. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
All right, I'll make it a little bit closer to this microphone. Yeah. Um, so today I'm joined again by Georgia Vavasour. Um, it's been a while, 3 years almost. Yes.
Yeah, I think it has. It seems crazy long.
Yeah. So actually, you're the one who is responsible for the way that the podcast works because initially it was meant to be just me talking nonsense with people that I know. And remember the day that you came and Dylan was well podcasting, and then when you sat down and started to tell your story, then I was like, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. It's supposed to be about that other person, and hearing their story, and that really I always say shaped the way this podcast unfolds now every time. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I thought that
Yeah.
it always been like that.
No, it was quite a lovely accident that it just unfolded that way.
Well, the first podcast we did is still getting quite a lot of airtime.
Yeah,
My
right, right.
students and prospective students keep listening to it and referring to it, and yeah, it's still floating around.
Beautiful. So, you were a fairly new teacher back then, is that correct?
Yeah, I was teaching, wasn't I?
I
Yeah,
think so, yeah, yeah,
yeah, 3 years. Yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, that was early on, and we're a few years down the track.
And what have you done since then? What's been going on since then?
A lot of teaching.
Yeah.
That's been my main focus. It's just unfolded that way. And I'm based in New Zealand, so I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand, and Vedic meditation is still relatively new to New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there's really only a couple of us, two or three of us teaching in the country. So yeah, I just came back, I started teaching, and it's just been growing and growing and growing with lots of demand for more courses, advanced knowledge, retreats. And so I've been very busy meeting the
Beautiful.
demand. Yeah.
That's a very, very fortunate thing to have happen.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And it just, I think it speaks to the experience that people have when they learn, and
Mm-hmm.
then they tell their friends, and it just tends to spread like that.
Yeah. And what about India and stuff like that? Have you been back much since you've become a teacher?
I have. India draws me back at least once a year, if not twice. I,
Mm-hmm.
I try not to go. I'm like, no, this year I'm just going to stay and teach. And then something will happen. People will start building interest to want to go there on retreat. So I usually end up running a retreat there once a year. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I did last year. I had a break because India retreats can be quite intense.
Yeah.
And so I had a break from that last year, but I still was there a couple of times. I'm always there in India with Tom and for our advanced training and refresher for Vedic meditation teachers, which is like summer camp.
Yeah.
Vedic meditation teachers on
Mm-hmm.
the banks of the Ganges. So I'm always there for that, and then usually a retreat at one other time in the year.
Nice. And how was were there people in teacher training this year while the lockdown happened?
Yes, I believe they've just returned.
Right.
So yeah, they've had a very interesting experience. So what a blissful place to be in lockdown.
Yeah, right, absolutely. But also what a crazy like thing to go through to go into that and then come out and the whole world has stopped.
Yeah, just like you.
Yeah.
You've been sequestered, and so is everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
You
I
you
mean, I
you
think,
kind of you'd feel responsible for it at that point, wouldn't you?
yeah, well, I think they're coming out. You know, they will have done 3 months of rounding, which is the rounding's an advanced technique that you learn if you choose to as part of the Vedic tradition,
Hmm.
which deepens meditation and accelerates stress release. And so you can do a lot more meditation when it's bookended by the rounding process, which pacifies the nervous system and allows it to more readily release stress without it becoming too uncomfortable. And so 3 months of that, they'll be coming out very rested, very adaptable, very de-excited, and probably in the best position to respond to changing times, I would say.
Yeah, what a trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did tell them. It wasn't kind of like that big brother group that sort of they were deciding whether they were going to tell them or not, whether they just come out into this new world. Tell them, but I think they weren't sure whether they would be able to get flights back. Yeah.
So do they have to go into isolation now, ironically?
If they're coming back to New Zealand, they do. I don't know if we had any Kiwis. Yeah, we did have one Kiwi. So they'll be going from sequestered to actual lockdown.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, Australia's a bit more relaxed, a bit more.
They can just round again for another 14 days when they get home.
Yeah, but we got around unsupervised review.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So how are you going in this time, and what's the vibe over there?
I can feel in the collective there is a lot of fear and anxiety. Still, I get a bit of a feel for that, and also whenever I go to the supermarket, you can just sense what the general public is feeling. I think most people aren't prepared for this degree of uncertainty in life in terms of how things will be when we come out, what the state of the economy will be. There's already been a lot of changes in people's work lives, and in some cases, additional pressure in the home life with, two parents at home with kids working, if they're lucky enough for their job to still be going. There's been different pressures to deal with. So, what I'm hearing from the people I'm in touch with and a lot of my students is that, people are tired, they're quite fatigued. And really what's happening is, there is a global upgrade happening, and there's a lot of purification of, ideas, ways of behaving, the way that we have interacted with nature and its resources, and all manner of things that are being purified that just that aren't sustainable for the way forward. And I think people on an individual level are experiencing quite a lot of upheaval. Might be emotional or lots of realizations happening. When I talk to people, they're going through a lot of, it seems to be an intense time, and it's happening on a micro and it's happening on a macro scale. So this global purification that's happening, really what's happening is nature, the planet, the entire collective consciousness is being upgraded. And when people slow down and they they not quite stop, but they slow down, they're not commuting and buzzing around doing all the million things they might have been trying to do before this, particularly in New Zealand, because you can't really do anything except be at home. And so that slowdown allows the body to start resting, get into a bit of a rest mode because of that, less of that rushing sensation. And then it starts to want to release stress and fatigue like it does in meditation. But now we've also got these other times during the day. And so people are confused about why they're tired, even though they have a lot more space and time and they're not doing as much. And, an argument could be made for, well, the less you do, the more fatigued you feel, but people are still exercising and walking and getting around. It's more the body is releasing banks of fatigue and various stresses that haven't been dealt with because of the slowdown. So there's a lot of that happening, I think, and a lot of people not aware of that process of what actually the body does when it starts resting.
100%, yeah. And would you say that people are more concerned and worried about the financials than they are about the actual virus itself?
I think so. I think most people aren't living in fear of the virus. I think, that real fear state, some people in at-risk groups might still be concerned, but the numbers, particularly in New Zealand, are quite low. And certainly the number of deaths is very low. I think the economy is probably more of a concern.
And that's the kind of the area where everyone's been shaken up the most, and our attachment or our ideas of our identity with what we do and what we have, even though it sounds cold to say, these things are being taken away from us so we can see, or what's revealed is the underlying insecurity behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And it can sound cold to say that this is for a purpose and it's for a reason, but certainly there is an awakening happening within that, even though it's not, doesn't feel good, and it's tumultuous for people to go through. Yeah. And so there's a kind of like a knowing between that this is supposed to happen, but also the complete uncertainty of how things are going to look once it's finished, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a big shift. And when there's a big shift in expectations, then, it tends to produce fear response, and maladaptive response. To really depending on to what degree you've been through things in the past and have built resilience to changing situations. And so if you've got that adaptation and stability there, particularly what I'm seeing is, those that have been meditating for a while, a lot more adaptive and a lot less fear, and it's marked them, their experience, as opposed to those around them, even in their own house or their own family. And the questions they're often asking me is, how do I best support those around me who are stressed, because I'm not actually stressed. And sometimes they're like, should I be stressed? I'm like, well, stress isn't actually helpful.
Yeah.
We want to kind of be adapting and seeing what it is that we can do, what's in our control. Okay, so this is changing. What am I going to do now?
I just wanted to point out too that the fear response isn't necessarily natural, but it's a natural response to change when we're not expecting it, and when we haven't had anything like this in our lives. That it's not nothing wrong with it if we're going through something like that. It's quite a natural process to go through, right?
Yeah, I
and
think the processing of fear. So when we start to experience fear, then we can move through it. If we move through a situation like this and we fast forward to a few months down the track or a year down the track, and we're actually fine meaning, okay, our income or our finances might have taken a dip, things might have changed, but are we actually okay? We're alive, we're breathing, our family's around, life is going on. And that's when the mind starts to see, oh, okay, this was actually okay, and it sort of it learns through that experience. So this is what, like you were saying before, it sometimes seems harsh to say that, good things are happening, change is happening, evolution's happening, even though the circumstances are very trying. But really that's when we learn the most, is through the most difficult circumstances. And I say that with a lot of compassion, and also, for me, this hasn't impacted me that much. I mean, it is impacting on a financial and economic level, but, because I've been through so many very trying circumstances, from cancer to divorce to, lifelong depression and all of these things, and come through it builds resilience. So, I don't say that for being like, oh, everything's fine. And, I get it, but I've seen, what happens when you come through the other side of those things, if you choose to harness that opportunity.
And then you can sort of tap into that experience and use it in the present moment through this experience, right?
Yeah, it just reminds you, oh, I came through that. I've been through something like this before. I let go of, for me, I let go of, all financial security when I quit my corporate job. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I think we talked about this in our first episode.
We did.
Yeah. And I really didn't know. I didn't have a plan at that time. I didn't know I was going to become a teacher of this. And waves and waves and waves of fear. Like, I made the decision very easily and I left it. But then after that, suddenly it was like my mind kind of woke up and went, whoa, what if we never earn money again? And I literally was having thoughts like that. And I was like experiencing these waves, and I was meditating regularly, but still waves and waves of fear. And what was happening was all that security that I'd held in having that secure, stable income, which is why I'd been in that corporate job for so long. It wasn't fueling my passion or anything like that. It was security. Which is based on fear, right? So when I let that go, the letting go of it produced these waves and waves and waves of fear. And I think that even if people aren't doing it consciously, it's happening anyway at the moment. That fear that's moving through is actually a letting go of, being attached with and identified with certain set of circumstances. And so then after all that fear left, then, and I wouldn't be able to do my job the way I do it now. I call it a job. It's sort of, job isn't a good word for it, but if we look at it in
your dharma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, at any time how many people I'll be teaching, where the income's coming from, I just kind of roll with it. But I couldn't have done that if I hadn't gone through that letting go process. And so it kind of lined itself up for me to experience that and let go of that and find my stability and sense of self simply in who I am and being. And that might sound, like kind of a leap for people, but the process is happening anyway. And then when they go through an experience like this and find that something different happens on the other side, something they weren't expecting that's actually better than the way things were, or even, people just finding that they're slowing down and they're enjoying that slower pace of life, and maybe it wasn't so sustainable with how quickly and how much they were expecting of themselves. They might change things as a result of that. There's lots of letting go happening that will mean that they feel better as a result of it on the other side.
Yeah. And a lot of, especially around what we do and what we earn and this kind of status that we have established an identity on that level, and collectively we do that a lot, where it's like, Instagram life, look what I have, look what I'm doing. Or look what job I have and the status within that. And it's not so much a conscious decision, but more of a subconscious thing that we don't have connection to that inner being, and we substitute that by getting things from the outside. It's very subtle, right? And this is a collective shake-up of like whatever we are identifying with. It's not real. It's not tangible. It's not something that we can hold on to forever. But there is a part of ourselves inside that we have the ability to connect to that never changes, and that is this constant stream of creativity. And it's our security, our real insecurity, right? Our inner security. And so, as traumatic as this time is for everybody, it can be a great gateway into looking within yourself or within themselves to find that deep connection, right?
Yeah, and I think, what I've heard from people as well is they're being challenged in different areas, and it might be the relationships under strain because they're home a lot together and they're both working, or they're used to having more time apart or something like that, or finances under pressure, or there's emotional upheaval, or all manner of things. And so it's really being highlighted where the sticky areas are, what you're still holding on to, if you've done a lot of work of letting go of things and being more in that flow state of moving from one experience to the next. What did you find hard about lockdown, about corona, the situation? Therein lies the work, something, that sticky point, like, oh, okay, I'm still, can I let go a little bit more in that area? Or are there things that I need to address that have been under the carpet? And, with the busy life, we could just kind of leave it there, but it was kind of amassing and there was starting to be a bit of a stench coming up from it. But now we've got to stop and like, oh, that's kind of starting to smell. We have to address that, whatever it might be, lifestyle, behaviors, styles of relating, jobs that you're just suddenly like, why am I doing that? It doesn't, it just doesn't feel right anymore. Or, decisions taken out of our hands, and, life is just organized for that job to come to an end. And that leaves, as harsh as that experience is, and of course it brings a lot of emotion and fear and instability with it, but it also creates space and opportunity for discovering perhaps something that's even better or more suited, or a new way of working or being.
And that brings me to something else that I wanted to talk about, just if you wanted to speak about it a little bit, with anxiety and the kind of Western model of it's a sickness or an illness, and within this experience we can, like, everyone should be feeling something, you know, we shouldn't be disconnected from what we feel. And so it's quite natural to feel anxious or uncertain in a time that is of upheaval, of a shake-up. So you want to speak to anxiety from the perspective of meditation for a bit?
Yeah, I think, you know, anxiety tends to be, you know, as a result of the body having, you know, stored up some stresses and got into a long lasting habit of being in fight or flight. Even if it's low levels of fight or flight, it's sort of the body's normalized that experience and the actual blood chemistry is reflecting it. And so that person who, if they were already generally, you know, already experiencing some anxiety, and then it's kind of gone up a few notches, if not a lot of notches, with such a change in expectation. Generally, if we've got, you know, low levels of anxiety or some fear still in the system, you know, everyone's got a little bit of fear to some degree, but lots of fear sort of stored up, then there, you know, when a big change in expectation comes, then it's going to really spike that. So what meditation does is it starts to, actually changes the blood chemistry. Every time you meditate, there are chemicals released which are the opposite of fight or flight. They're the stay and play bliss chemicals. And so they counteract that chemistry that the body's essentially got habituated to running, this set of fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, all those different fight or flight chemicals, which have a massive impact on the body and on the functioning of the mind and obviously emotions and things like that. So as the body keeps meditating regularly, and those bliss chemicals get released, and they're what we call stay and play chemicals. So they tell the body, oh, everything's okay. We can stay and play here. We don't need to rush around. We don't need to run away. There's not a predator chasing us. And they're chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, endorphins, anandamide. And they're responsible for feelings of security, trust, well-being, even confidence. Serotonin is the confidence molecule. So as those get released and the body starts to re-habituate to its natural state, which is stay and play, everything's fine, some valid threat comes along, meaning like an actual imminent threat to your life, and you can still get stressed and the body will release stress chemistry, but its baseline can more readily return back to that stay and play, as it's supposed to be in nature. You know, you look at a zebra running around, it gets chased by a tiger, and then, you know, 5 minutes later it's back to eating grass. Oh yeah, everything's fine. But humans don't do that because we don't give the body enough rest and repair time, and the amount of sort of oncoming stresses in modern day life means that the body gets habituated to fight or flight and it starts to stay in that state. And we're not meant to be in it for prolonged periods of time. And this is really the basis of anxiety. And also it tends to be related to some big stress events in childhood. They may not have been events that someone would label as, you know, particularly traumatic, dramatic childhood, but the experience of the child at the time, it was a big deal. So it could be that the child was particularly sensitive, particularly perceptive, which a lot of children are, and they have very open energetic nervous systems at that age, and they store, you know, they have a stress response and they start storing these triggers down in their nervous system. And if they have enough of those, a sizable amount, and if their parents are quite stressed, that obviously impacts their experience, because children are taking in everything in their environment. I was one of these kids. And so, you know, as those stresses build up, then, you know, we can enter into anxiety at some point in life. And it tends to be, you know, I'll teach people at 11, 12, 13 that are having severe anxiety. But, you know, a lot of late teens, early 20s, millennial type age group are just, it's just common. They all pretty much all have anxiety. It's very rare if they don't. So, you know, partly those stresses and also the way that we're living, the screens, they create anxiety because that flashing, they flash to maintain the screen. So that constantly looking at flashing actually disturbs the nervous system, and so it tends towards anxiety. And of course, we're on devices more than we ever have been in the past. So meditation is working both on that physiological level, but also on the emotional level, at releasing at the core, unwinding those original stress triggers slowly over time, because of that deep state of rest. If you're practicing a transcendent technique, that deep state of rest allows the body to unwind stresses. And when you do that twice a day, which is the recommended practice, then you release the incoming daily stress and also chip away at the old backlog. If we're not getting to the backlog, then we're not really going to see too much of a change in our experience of anxiety. But if we start chipping away at the backlog through that twice a day practice, which is why it's recommended that you practice twice a day, because it's that cumulative effect over twice daily meditation, then we start to see, people will report that their anxiety is improving, it's much less, or, in some cases it will disappear altogether.
I like that, because, from a medical perspective, treating anxiety a lot of the times is chemically, and it doesn't deal with the underlying cause of the reason why you're feeling anxious in the first place. And so you can treat the chemistry and change it, but then when you stop taking that drug, then the anxiety comes straight back as bad, if not worse. So, I feel like meditation can take longer to get to the deeper stuff there, but it's the more sustainable way of approaching the problem.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens very fast. I have within a couple of days of learning, and they're like, I've never felt this relaxed in my life, and I feel so good. And because the body, a couple of periods of those rest, and it starts to go, whoa, where has this been my whole life? So that is also a common experience.
Cool. What else is coming up for you recently? Is there anything that's present in your awareness around knowledge or anything like that?
In terms of what I'm doing, or?
Yeah, just a very vague question.
Vague. Yeah. I'm not sure where to go with that. I mean, I think what is this time? What is this time being for me? I think really more value on family. It's interesting what it sharpens into your awareness, and I think that family unit has been very present in my awareness, more so probably. And a lot of us are guilty of that, of taking it for granted a little bit. And it's been interesting. There's been, at times like a body yearning for physical contact with people, with loved ones. And then at other times, sensing and being able to experience them in consciousness and connecting on other more subtle levels, which we've experienced in group meditations. There's been some innovation in the way that I work. Vedic meditation is always taught in person, so I'm not teaching people to meditate at the moment, but group meditations online, I've been doing a lot of those to support people through this time. And it's been great because we've had big groups coming in online, of not as big as we meditated with Tom today, but on average of 25 to 30 people in a group med, which is a lot more than I usually would be able to make to get to a group med when it's physically in Auckland. And being able to connect with my students around the country, which they've really enjoyed. So they've had a lot more access to knowledge, and I'll keep running those after this ends, because I've been meaning to for a while. And of course, all of these things that you don't get round to. And, suddenly we're all Zoom experts. And Zoom is really killing it in COVID.
Absolutely.
You wanted to have shares in Zoom.
So if people are Vedic meditators, they can join your knowledge sessions and group meds as well.
They can, and I'm running 4 a week at the moment, so there's heaps of options, and I've kind of included like a 7:30 p.m. These are New Zealand times, but a 7:30 p.m. one night a week, which was asked for by parents. They're like, we can't get to anything earlier. It's quite a late time to meditate, but I wanted to give them an option for knowledge and group med. And then a lunchtime one on Fridays, which is also really popular. Again, people are, at the moment, they're all working from home, but down the track, they'll still be able to get to that time, as opposed to, 6 o'clock can be a busy time for people. But if you're in Australia, obviously this is a couple of hours earlier for you. So they can join the group meditations. And the other thing that I've been doing is running weekly Vedic knowledge masterclasses, which has been really, really well received. And we've dived deep into a few topics, the kind of things that we get to touch on in group meditation, but we don't get to go really deep and answer everyone's questions on a specific topic. So we've covered abundance, we've covered love and conscious relationships, we've covered manifestation, desires and letting go, and an Ayurveda workshop. And so those are all available via recordings. If people weren't able to make the class, they can purchase a recording, and we've got more coming up. And people are really, really getting a lot out of it. And I've had lots of feedback about it triggering changes in them, and, pulling a few things up from under the rug too.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a new way of working, and it just came to me at the start of lockdown, and then I'll probably keep that going too, because I usually run the Exploring the Veda deeper knowledge courses, but they're in person and not everyone can get to them. Lots of students around the country. So it's really been expanding the access of the knowledge to a broader base of people, which has been.
And it just also allows you to step in more and more into your roles that as that teacher, and give that knowledge yourself, huh?
Yeah, and I just love giving knowledge. So the more I can do it, the better. And great discussions with, diving into context, which for me is probably the richest part of the knowledge, is exploring it in context of people's personal lives. And one thing that people seem to be enjoying about Zoom, particularly in New Zealand, is anonymous question asking. Yeah, they can type in the chat anonymously to you. They're almost 95% of the questions are anonymous. And, previously in group med, people were quite shy to ask questions, whereas now there's just questions pouring in, which obviously deeply enriches and informs the knowledge flow and the process. So it's been great.
Cool. That's awesome. I know that last time we spoke on the podcast, I didn't have this question in the podcast, but I have a question now. It's, what is your favorite wisdom or quote of all time?
Oh goodness. How do I pick one?
I don't know. Just what's one that maybe stood out when on your path to becoming a teacher, and you were just like, yeah, that makes sense.
I lean towards Gurudev's "You deserve the best," but probably one piece of knowledge that really sat with me, and it's not a quote, but it really, and it's appropriate now, it's appropriate all the time, and it allowed me to let go of a lot of my attachment to money, which in turn allowed me to actually discover what the thing is that I was meant to be doing, which is over here, and I was way over there. So it was miles away from knowing what that is. And that's often what people come to me and they ask, well, I'm doing this, but I want to know what is the thing that I should really be doing, but I don't have any idea. And I was one of those people. I was working in insurance and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't have a burning desire to, be an architect or an interior designer or something. And so I just never left, because I was like, well, who knows, I've got to get income here, I'll just stay here, dawdling around in the status quo. But I learned at some point in time that, money essentially it's energy, and it's like breath, it's like air. What happens when we hold on to it too much? We hold on. No more's coming in, right? And so we have to allow it to flow in and out, like breath. It comes and it goes, and we let it move through us. And and knowing that there's always more air, always more is coming, and actually more will come the more that we breathe out. It's more likely to come back in. And so that has really informed the way that I relate to money. It just comes and it goes, and I'm not concerned about it not coming, and I'm also not concerned about it going. I'm happy to spend it. And when I notice that I'm holding on a little bit, I go, well, you're starting to hold on to your breath, you know. And so I found experientially through that process of, you know, if I find that I'm holding on to it or starting to get into some kind of, well, I don't know where money's going to come from, I'll start contracting. I won't spend anymore. I'll hold on to what I have. I immediately start spending. Not gratuitous spending, just on the things that are required at that time, you know, the things that are coming up, that are bubbling up, charming for me. I'm not going to be spending out of a need to fill a hole, because I don't have that hole there so much. But yeah, that was probably a key piece of knowledge that's informed my particular path.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Awesome.
That's a good question.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
I don't know.
No, we can just leave it. We can just leave it at that. That was great.
Yeah, it's good to chat.
Yes, thank you so much for
going, Dan.
How am I going?
Yeah.
I'm going so well. You know, I left Melbourne at the end of last year. I felt that the charm to get out, and I didn't know where I was going to be or what I was going to do. In the same way, you just let go and move into the unknown. And I'm in paradise. You know, it's a beautiful 25 degrees and sunny outside. So, you know, it's the best place that I can think of to be, you know, I say isolated, but I don't feel isolated. You know, I feel very supported, and I feel very grateful and happy that I am where I am, and, you know, just letting life inform of me of what's going on in this change. Because, like, to be honest, I don't know, and I don't think anyone that says they know probably doesn't know either. So we're just here and trying to I guess be of service. One of the big things that came up around the start of this was I felt that wave of collective fear, and like I really felt that this is going to cause a lot of mental health problems, that because, you know, we have so much attachment to the external, and this is going to shake up a lot of things. And I felt just a shift in myself to be like, stop, just be more serious, be more focused about being of service and stepping into that role. And it's so interesting, like a lot of things come up around people with conspiracy theories, and people getting angry at governments, and just coming back to not getting drawn into that mentality, and just coming back to these things are symbols or expressions of the collective consciousness and not the cause of our suffering. And just going back into that, you know, governments are reflecting of what we've been in the past. And so if everyone that cares so much to share the conspiracies and to throw hate at the government, if they want to step up and, you know, become elective officials, now's the time, you know.
Yeah.
If we instead of, you know, blaming the top of the pyramid, just look at ourselves and ask, how can I serve just my immediate community, like my immediate family, or whatever reach that I have, you know, instead of being so concerned about the big picture and trying to change all that. If we all just serve each other on a very micro level, then everything will be great, you know?
Yeah, I totally feel that. And that, you know, my response was like, well, I can't teach right now in the most official sense of teaching people to meditate, but what can I give? You know, okay, we used to be one group med a week, now it's 4. You know, and it felt really good to just step into that and to see the response. And I think that's a lot of people do get caught up in, well, all this crazy stuff's going on, and we need to address this and we need to address that, and a lot of it's out of our control, really, ultimately. Yeah. So what is in your control is your own backyard, which might need some pruning or...
Exactly. And so for someone like yourself, you've developed the capability, let's call it a capability, to be of service to a large group of people. You have reach, and you've developed that underlying capability. And so this is a time for you to use that capability and to be of service. And I see a lot of people yelling at their phones or screaming into the internet void about the problems that we have, instead of looking at themselves to ask themselves how they can be of service to whatever problems they see and they have the capability to respond to. Because if we don't have the capability to change something and we're just constantly putting our awareness on it, we're actually growing it, right?
Yeah, and you know, it's about a lot of these issues that we're talking about have come, you know, from the baseline. If we take the baseline, like you were talking about, the top of the pyramid, you go down to the baseline, the bottom of the pyramid, that is actually every individual person's own state of consciousness and what they're harboring still in that. So if we have a baseline of, you know, the global state of consciousness, let's say, we'll add all the pieces of consciousness together and we get our big global consciousness, our own consciousness. And what we have is a lot of sense of separation because lack of direct experience of the layer at which we are literally all unified, and a lot of fear and anxiety and anger built up in the nervous system. Now, if you don't have a bank of anger or stress in your nervous system, any conspiracy theory is not going to draw that reaction out on you. You're not going to start railing against it. You'll be like, oh, that's not good. You know, what can I do about that? And that's the adaptive response. The maladaptive is I need an outlet for my existing anger or my existing stress. And that's okay. You know, it's very natural for us to do that. When we have that bundle of stresses and we haven't known what to do with it. So then, you know, my way of responding to questions about what we do about this is we start pruning our own backyard first before we go into the neighbors' backyards and we start helping out there, because we can't help from, if our yard is already overgrown, we can't go then, oh, I'll help you prune over there and prune over there, but you know, my yard's an absolute mess. You know, we have to start within, and it makes us feel so much more empowered when we just come back to, okay, what's within my sphere of influence? Start doing something about releasing my own underlying anger and things, because that collective anger and fear and stress is what produces this kind of behavior in society, these wrong actions or whatever it is that we're bemoaning at the time. And so, you know, we've got to start at home and then, you know, with our own stuff. Okay, well, you know, I might look into ways that I've sort of heard about before but haven't really done yet, but now I've got the time. I might learn one of these things. I might actually start to give my body some time to release some of these old stresses. And, you know, I'll serve my immediate bubble, the New Zealand bubble, or my community at large, if, you know, that becomes appropriate as restrictions lessen and things like that. You know, that's where we can, if we all did that in our own bubbles, that whole collective effect would be massive. But if we sit at home and just bemoan things that are happening way away from any kind of influence that we can have, it's not to say that, you know, we still need to have our collective community voice to say, yeah, we're not okay with whatever it might be. But first comes the backyard, you know, and I think that there's a lot of power in that and less stress, because like, well, I can actually do something about that right now today.
Yeah, and that's basically what this this time really brought up in me, and it really caused me to be like, all right, what do I need to do immediately just to get the backyard sort of pruned up, and then how can I be of service to the people that I have access to, you know? And so yeah, I'm grateful for that, and it's sort of made me a little bit less sarcastic in my approach, you know. I like to be funny.
We enjoy your sarcasm so much, Dan.
Sorry?
We enjoy your sarcasm.
Yeah, I know, but it's not always helpful, you know. So, so it's not that I'm trying. It's just that it became more clear to me. I need to actually, you know, take the collective anxiety and depression thing a little bit more. I felt it a bit more directly, and I was like, oh, this is something that I can influence. And then if I don't, then I'm actually going to inherit it. You know, that's what I felt. You know, I'm going to take it on if I don't actually work towards doing something about it. So yeah, so
true. And so does that mean you're doing more podcasts? And it seems like you've been very busy.
More podcasts. I'm running the One Giant Mind Learn to Meditate course, and doing, you know, group meds and that myself. So cool. Just doing what I can.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And where are you? Where is this?
I'm just north of Byron Bay.
Oh wow, amazing! So your fine level of feeling got you moving before the lockdown, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For an idyllic COVID experience.
Yeah, it was so perfect, actually. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, awesome.
But at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that aren't doing so great, and you know, I'm more than happy to help in any way, you know, through meditation or jump on a Zoom call and have a chat, you know. So just do what we can to look after each other, you know.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the chat. Thanks for the catch up.
Thanks. It's been great to talk.
And for shaping the podcast as it is.
I really didn't know I played that role, but I'm very glad to have that podcast because
Yes.
people are always going, well, you know, we want to know more about your story. I'm like, oh, you can listen to it over.
Great. Well, it's awesome. All right. So you take it easy, and we'll catch up shortly.
You too.
I'll probably see you at one of your group meds soon.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Look,
All right.
see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.